recording studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me today is Barry Gibb sitting in for Chris Hellstrom.
Hello, Jody. That was my worst Australian accent ever.
Well done, you.
Yeah, well, that's as good as it gets.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I'm feeling you people that are listening to this or watching the YouTube would understand the reference. I feel like my hair, I look like Barry Gibb today. So
yes, so I just rolled with it.
It's a rough look to pull off, but again, I'm a pro. I'm going to try to rise above.
Damn right.
Yeah. How you doing, Jody?
I am doing all right. It's been a slow morning.
Yeah.
It's been a slow morning. It almost is beginning to finally feel like I'm living Groundhog Day. Almost.
A little bit, right? Yeah. Yeah. No, I can relate. It's now hopefully by the time this actually airs, we're in different times, but yeah. As of time of recording, we're in the middle of this plague going through the
That's an interesting
world.
term, plague.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd call it a plague. It's certainly called a pandemic at this point, but
Yeah.
oh well.
No, I was trying to not name it by name because yeah, it just bums me out.
Well, this is still replayable at the point of pandemic. If there's ever one in the future. Oh, we're in a pandemic again. All right.
What are you going to do for this year's pandemic? Yeah.
It almost feels like that's what we're going to start having yearly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it's rough.
But let's get into talking some music and some guitars. How about that?
I think that sounds like an awesome idea.
This is now part 4 in how to layer guitars in a 4-part arc. So we're going to finish up today.
Yeah.
Hey, isn't that
nice?
It's
been
after that, we're never talking guitars ever again. Never.
Never. I have a feeling that it's the biggest lie ever.
Do I need to do I need to put up like air quotes or some kind of like sarcasm? We need a sarcasm symbol.
Something, yeah.
So we can throw it up there and be like, that's sarcasm.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, we will more than likely talk guitars again because we're both guitar nerds. So, yeah. But today's episode, we are covering sort of like the last step, I suppose, at least the way I approach it. But we're talking about effects or additional effects.
During the mix phase.
During the mixing phase,
yeah. Effects during the mix phase.
Last episode we started talking about the mixing phase, and we started about panning and placing and a little bit of leveling, that kind of thing.
Yep.
If you didn't listen, go back and listen to that one.
Yes, so it's the episode prior to this version, part 3.
Yeah. So today we're dealing a little bit with anything else you might put on there. So what's the first thing that you might do to a guitar? Actually, maybe we should start by well,
that's a loaded question.
That is a very, very loaded question. But I was going to say, let's start maybe with, we talked in past episodes that you and I would both only print effects if it's an integral part to the performance.
Yeah.
Or if it's signature sound, that type of a thing. And then even then we would print it on a separate track if possible. So
from a direct input guitar, hopefully, yes.
Something like that, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. How would you go about just first dealing with those things when it comes to this part of the mix?
Dealing with the printed effects?
Yeah.
Well, I would roll them up to see how they perform in the track.
All right.
Get the levels, find out if they have sonic issues to them, if they need any EQing, that kind of thing.
So kind of like a reevaluation.
Yep.
Of how they sound. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And hopefully we placed enough thought to that at the tracking stage that there wouldn't be any issues. But let's say
that's the hope. Plan ahead. Do it. Commit.
But this would be the stage where I would sort of think about, okay, well, let's say that it's that time delay thing, like what I like to call the edge, the U2 type of vibe. Where
the dotted eighth.
Delay. Yeah, the dotted eighth and the dotted 16th and to have that wonderful echo.
Yes.
But let's say that...
that's a CLA reference if you don't know.
The dotted eighth.
Yeah, as of a couple of days ago, I watched something, and it was a live thing a couple of days ago, and he makes reference
Yeah.
to, in one of his plugins, I think it's the guitar plugin
Yeah.
that he has, there are 3 different settings for delay on there. One of them is the 8th note delay. The second one's called the edge. And then the third one is called the quarter or something like that. And
Okay, so that's
he
the
explains
dotted eighth,
what the 8th or what the edge meant, and it's dotted 8th. And he makes this reference and a joke of saying that when he sees the edge in the future, he's just going to call him dotted 8th.
There you go.
So he's no longer the edge. He's now dotted 8th.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing, actually. I mean, if you had such an impact
on the world of something in music, that you now become the Xerox or the Kleenex of the system.
Well, but in the guitar universe, is like, we talk the Hendrix chord. No, it's not a 7 #9. It's the Hendrix chord, right? That's pretty cool. So backtracking there. So now I would listen to that delay and see if that's still usable. If we have that sync delay, it could be a timing issue, or it could be whatever. It could be the quality of the delay is not what we're looking for. So then I would go about possibly replacing that with a similar effect to make that sit better. But in a perfect world, I wouldn't have to do that. So it's working nicely, because that would be the whole idea up front, right?
I feel like I need to be in like a pose for meditation and thinking, perfect world, please don't make me change something because it doesn't sound right.
Right. In a perfect world, all delays would be synced properly and drifting where appropriate. Right,
exactly.
Yeah. But what about things like reverb and stuff?
That comes down to the concept of how was it tracked, and if I have a direct signal and I have a room signal and they blend well together, great. Or if the actual guitar sound was mic'd appropriately, if it was being mic'd from a cabinet and there were multiple mics and they were blended properly, fantastic. If it's a software-based version of a guitar amp like you and I tend to use a lot of the time, the fortunate thing that we have in the software that we tend to use, there are room mics that can be set up in that software and be used appropriately. If not, I will create a reverb bus specifically for guitar parts.
Right.
Whether it's for the entire song or for a specific part of the song, I will bus that guitar into some reverb or a room sound of some sort, whether it's an IR or an actual reverb type unit, to give it space.
Yeah.
If it needs it. And generally, you need to have a little bit at least to make it sound somewhat natural if it doesn't have it at all.
Yeah. No, I think, but that's the key phrase there, right? Unless you're going for like an effect, right? Just to make it sound a little bit more alive. But
use it in your face.
Yeah, but using it sparingly. So what kind of reverbs do you, let's say that you're using some kind of IR. What kind of IR would you be looking at using?
Oh my. Get ready to take a shot. Program dependent.
Sure.
Being the primary DAW at the moment is Logic. Most often, I'm going to be pulling up a Space Designer if I'm going for the IR route. If I'm looking for a standard, like even just not even a standard room, but a room that has been well modeled, it would be the Ocean Way.
Even for guitars.
Even for guitars. I've used it multiple times on guitars. It just has a nice quality to it with the way they do the close, mid, and far mics that you can blend. You can turn, you could use just the far mic or just the close mic or the middle or any combination of the 3. And then you can blend them together inside, and you can choose the certain microphones in there that you're using for that spacious sound. So you can get a very realistic room out of Ocean Way's 2 rooms that they have.
Yeah.
And that is a universal audio plugin. I'm sure that somebody else has done an Ocean Way plugin as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not that versed to know everybody else that's done an Ocean Way model, but Universal Audio's done it and it sounds great. So I tend to
Yeah.
use it when I want more of a like a modeled room sound.
Yeah.
Space Designer has that as well. Don't always use Space Designer for that. I use them usually for the more very short reverb space type things or the really long reverb type
Yeah.
things that may or may not be needed. And then if it's something that's like maybe a surf guitar and it might need a spring reverb, well, then I'm going to pull
Right.
up a spring reverb plugin and use that instead because that's going to be more appropriate. Same thing if I want it to sound like it's going through a plate, then I'll
Yeah.
use a plate reverb. So it's a little bit program dependent, but if it's a room kind of thing and it needs to be modeled after a room, I like that Ocean Way room and I
Yeah.
tend to use that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would echo all of that. No pun intended. But
You mean delay,
yeah.
but with one?
No, but I tend to go for a similar route. I'm not a UA user, but I like Verb Suite from Liquisonics.
Okay.
I would use that or Space Designer as well. But the same
Sure.
thing there. I would use probably a wooden room type of thing and just kind of have it just creates that little bit of spaciousness to that and very, very sparingly. But using it sparingly actually goes a long way to just kind of make those sit a little bit. And the same thing if we're looking at something as an effect. Let's say that you want something a huge shimmery clean part or something. I might go for like a plate or something like that. But more often than not, I think we talked about it in the mixing episode. But if I'm doing that, I will a lot of times EQ out a lot of top end from the reverb. So you can actually use a little bit more of it without it just being overpowering. So the same thing goes here for guitars, obviously, if I'm using something. But just like you said as well, I would 99 times out of 100, probably 99.999 times out of 100.
That's a lot of times.
That's a lot of times. But place it on a bus.
Sure.
And kind of mix that in. So the benefit that I look at that is if you have, we're talking about layering guitars. So if you have multiple guitars, they can all share that same room and
Yes.
kind of glue that together a little bit.
They
so you
certainly
don't have to
can.
Yeah. So speaking of echo, what about delays and things?
Yeah.
If they're not printed
if it's not printed and it needs it, yeah, I'll add a delay. If it is printed, then you have to look at how well it was printed and how integral, as we've said before, it is to the sound of the guitar.
Yeah.
And if it's more to be a background effect or a foreground effect is a big difference in terms of like bringing it in, how much to bring it in. And maybe that's a good point of where it's like, we transition into talking about the EQing of the effects that we may or may not be putting on guitars at this point. Because a lot of the times I will not use a full range sound to a guitar delay.
Yeah.
I will definitely do a high and low pass filter on it more often than not to bring off the high end, to bring off the low end and kind of make it something that kind of sits in the background more often than not, unless it's really integral to what's going on. That's just
I agree.
Preference.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when I discovered that.
Oh, you discovered EQing?
Yeah, well, EQing like delay returns and stuff.
Gotcha.
I was like, why have I not done this before?
It's a miracle.
Yeah, because it doesn't smear any of like. First of all, the low end. It's like you don't need that kind of delay down there, so I tend to be fairly aggressive when I'm cutting frequencies out of the delay return type of thing. So and the same thing on the top end, you get that little bit more mellow sort of delay, and it tends to sit a little bit better, unless you're going for that super shimmery, of course, then it's one thing, right? But if it's in delay, I would just about only time I would use a delay on a guitar would be if it's more of a lead part to kind of thicken that up a little bit.
Sure.
I find that if you like we're doing now, we're talking about layering guitars. If you've layered a bunch of guitars, you're just going to smear that if you just have a lot of delays and things going on.
It's like Philly cream cheese, the art of the schmear.
Sure. I don't eat cream cheese, so that'll tell you about my delay usage. No,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can have, if it's like a delay throw, you have like just an echo hitting off to pad hard left or right, or doing something like that as an effect, which is like a one spot type of thing. Those are other uses where you might do it if you have a chord hit at a certain point and you want that to bounce all over the place. That would be more of a creative use, but just having it on the track for the duration of the song, very rarely for me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. But the same kind of thought can also be applied to reverbs and other
Absolutely.
effects that you might throw on the guitar in terms of EQing what the return is doing so that it doesn't muck up the rest of the mix, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, and I know we're talking about layering guitars here, but let's say that if you have a mix that's a little bit more sparse, would you tend to maybe be a little bit more heavy-handed with use of effects? Or I know, again, program dependent, but
not necessarily. No.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, it's kind of interesting you say sparse and then layering extra guitars.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit of an oxymoron, but
yeah. Yeah, if I'm layering guitars on something that's relatively sparse, I'm probably still trying to keep the sparse concept more than anything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, I would agree with that. Just curious, man. So,
just seems like that's a whole other episode to kind of get into in arranging.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I suppose the frustrating thing about all of this is the theme that keeps coming up again, right? It's always content dependent. Like it really depends on what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's not like you'll use these ideas all the time, but they are just another tool in your toolbox that you could pull out when it is appropriate, right? So
yeah, whether you need to hammer that shit or saw it off.
Yeah, right. Either one of that. Yeah. So what about another? I mean, most of us tend to think about chorusing. We're thinking like adding chorus to a guitar. It's a very sort of like 80s type of a sound kind of thing. But is there ever a use when you might use chorusing on guitars?
Maybe not so much when I'm layering guitars, but it could be done depending on the part and what is needed. Generally, I find that you get a slightly natural chorusing effect when you've recorded multiple layers of guitars.
Yeah.
So even with the best intonated instrument, the way you're going to finger something's going to change, and it's going to cause a slight bit of chorusing that is not consistent.
Yeah.
Because everything's going to be played slightly differently every time. So have I done it? Sure, I've done it. I'm not sure I'd call it something that gives me more size, but it's something that I've used once in a while on a particular guitar within the layers of other guitars.
Yeah. No, I suppose chorusing could be used to in somewhat fake size, right? If you have like one big guitar and you're doing that. I'm just reminded of an interview clip I saw with Dan Huff, who is now a producer in Nashville, but phenomenal session player.
Yes, he was. Yes, he probably still is.
Yeah. And the band Giant, but he said something, asked about chorus. No, I think I used up all the chorusing in the 80s. I don't have any left now. So that
well
made
said.
Me
well said, Dan. Well,
yeah. So so when we're layering, we're essentially painting broad strokes here. We're undoing a need for chorusing or something like that, unless there's effect parts. Like we're going for something over the top where we really want that to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, if I want a guitar section to sound like it's underwater, well, then I'll probably throw some heavy ass chorus on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you want it to sound like, 88, you have a 12 string and chorus that, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So when we're talking about effects returns now, do you ever use any compression or limiting or anything like that on?
Well, let's
effects
talk
returns?
about limiting right after we limit ourselves for a moment for a word from our sponsors. All right, we're going to talk about some compression and limiting right now. And
Sure.
what say you about it? Because you brought it up.
I pretty much would only use it if, again, it seems like all roads lead to the edge, right? But if we have that synced delay part, and I want that to really be dynamically controlled with the main guitar, I might use some slight compression on that just to make sure that certain delay repeats and everything it's not poking out. But that's pretty much it. I don't necessarily do any hard compression on any effects returns. It's very, very rare, actually, that I would do that.
I'm in the same boat with you there. It is heavily rare that I would ever compress or limit an effects return.
Yeah.
Heavily rare. Unless there's a reason for it. Like, say I've got a guitar reverb that needs to sound like it's swelling and then closing. Swelling and then closing. Then I'll probably throw some sort of compression or limiting on it to cause that effect. But it's not often.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's not like it can't be done. I mean, some people
of course
experiment with it. Of course, go for it. Yeah. It's just not very common. At least
it's not common for me.
In my universe,
not common for you. I just watched a video this morning of a live thing with another famous producer, mixing engineer, Jaquire King.
Mm-hmm.
No compression or limiting going on any of those effects returns. So,
yeah. Good enough for him.
It's good enough for him too.
Yeah.
So if you're finding yourself having a strong need to be compressing and limiting your actual guitar effects returns, something else might be very wrong.
Yeah, it might be the performance of the said guitar that you're sending to it.
Well, but even then, depending on how your sends are working, if you have a performance that's going awry in that regard prior to the mix stage and you've left it in the mix stage, you're probably compressing it before you're sending it out for your effects. One would hope.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the choices on some DAWs to be able to send prior to what's going on the channel strip, and sometimes you can do it after.
Pre or post fader.
Pre or post fader, and that can make a big difference in how your sends will work when you send them out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, speaking of busing.
We've already been kind of speaking of it already. What are we getting into now?
But let's say that you have how do you treat the busing from your effects? Let's say that because I have a feeling that I know your answer to this, and I think you share it.
But the world at large may not.
Yes. But if you have, let's make a blanket statement, like all your effects buses, do you send them straight to your master out, or do you tend to send them to the instrument group bus that they sort of are belonging to?
The answer is the latter of what you just said. And
yes,
the reason why is that comes from the production music world, is where I picked that up. Prior to working a lot with production music, I just let them go willy-nilly to wherever they went. And usually it was the master out. Now that I've done a lot of production work and a lot of production music, everything gets bused to its grouped situation. So all guitar effects are going to go to a guitar group.
Yeah.
All vocal effects are going to go. We're not really talking vocals, but any other instrumentation is all going to get its same grouped effects going to that instrument's group out, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I group all of my guitar effects into the guitar bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
That way,
No,
when something gets muted in terms of like doing an alternate bounce out of a mix, there's no stray effects happening that suddenly makes somebody go, "What the fuck was that?"
yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. And that I've done the same thing, and it comes from that. It's just having the flexibility when you're bouncing to create possibly alternate mixes or what is that you're doing, right? So it's not like you can't just send them straight to the out. That's absolutely fine, but just as a workflow thing, again, I tend to send them to their instrument group, and it just gives me more control over that.
I feel like Roger Ebert now. 2 thumbs up on that
Two
one.
thumbs up. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So try
So
both
for all of
ways.
you out there, we recommend that you bus all of your guitar layered effects to your guitar bus.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there.
absolutely. There you go. There we go. There, you said it.
It's been
And
said,
he
it's
did.
been done, and now we're off. No, just
Yeah.
kidding.
No. So the next thing I suppose we should just bring up here again, and we said
It's
it.
pretty much been said in every one of these parts. Part 1, part 2, part 3. Now in part 4, it's going to be setting. I know what you're going to say. What are you going to say?
I'm going to say that if it doesn't work, axe it. Get rid of the effect, whatever it is. If it doesn't suit the song, if it doesn't work in the arrangement, whatever happens to be, it might have been a great idea at the writing stage or the tracking stage, but at the mixing stage, it's like, no, you know what? That effect's not, it's not going to work right there.
You know
Get
what
rid of it.
Beyonce would say about that?
What
Don't
would
put
she
a
say?
ring on it.
Okay. All right. Sure. Well, we don't want to go against what she would say.
That's
'Cause
right.
then
The
it'll
Queen
be,
Bey.
yeah, it'll be hell to pay from her social media followers.
That's right. Have you ever? I've actually been at the brunt end of the Bay Hive, I guess it's called.
No, I have not.
It's not a pleasant
I'm not going to poke
experience.
that bear. No, I'm sure it isn't. But no, so it's the usual thing, right? Don't get married to stuff. I've heard, guitar players giving interviews. It's like, oh man, when the album came out, that effect was gone, and it really bummed me out because I had this amazing sound in the studio, but for whatever reason, it was not there at the tracking stage or at the mixing stage, and chances are it just didn't work.
Yeah, kind of failed it. Failed the litmus test at the end of the mix.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to get rid of stuff.
Don't be afraid to not get married.
Yeah. No, we're giving relationship advice here. Yeah.
Well, it's the beyond. I could just say it again. Don't put a ring on it.
Don't put a ring on it. Yeah. Yeah. If you liked it, you should put a ring on it. No, if you loved it, you should put a ring on it. Yeah. But anyway, last thing that we set throughout this whole arc as well of layering guitars, take stylistic cues from whatever genre of music that you're working
in
with.
Yes.
Yeah. And let that be a guide. You don't have to be afraid of doing something different.
Don't be
But,
like Bird Box and going in with your eyes wide shut.
Yeah, or your ears in this case. But also be aware that if you're trying to just invent a better mousetrap, it might not always work. So
That is truth.
yes.
Well, is that kind of? Are we like we're done with our 4-part arc now, aren't we?
I kind of feel like we're done with our 4-part arc.
Man, that was almost
Yeah.
like an e-ticket ride at Disneyland when they used to have that.
Well, I kind of feel like I was hoping that we were going to end on a kind of like, note. And I like to feel like we did that pretty successfly. Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
there it
in
is.
all seriousness, I think we covered
A
I
lot
think
of
at
ground.
least most of our workflow and our mentality of things that we tend to do when we're layering and getting the goals that all that can give.
Yep.
So anything else that you would like to add?
Not really. Not at this juncture, because we'll just open a new can of worms and get into a whole other episode at that point.
I say we leave that can of worms for the next episode. So
That's right.
I'm going to wish you an awesome day, Jody. And
Thank you,
talk
Chris.
soon. All
and
right.
for all of you out there and inside the recording studio land, we will see you, or you will listen to us next week.